everybody. Thanks for waiting. I really appreciate that. So let me just pop my slides on. Okay. And what I'm going to do, chaps, is I'm actually going to turn my video off because I think it's quite nice to be able to concentrate on the content that you're seeing this morning. Okay, so are you ready? Are you recording, Helen? Fabulous, thank you very much. So good morning. So for those of you that were able to attend her session, we would like to firstly thank Dr. Kylie Henderson for her really interesting and informative perspective on mental health and the use of technology. For our response session, we plan to share with you a personal journey of mental health care and technology, which will be followed by a discussion on the variety of options that technology provides as alternatives to face-to-face intervention. We will also address the positioning we can take as practitioners regarding technical support awareness with our client base and how to get started in the best way. So before we begin, a quick moment to introduce. I know obviously me and Helen have shown our faces this morning. So between us, we have over 20 years in the L&D and employability sector, and we're here representing our learning and development company, 2SimplyLearn. So thank you for joining us this morning, and it's a real pleasure to have you all with us today. This is an open and safe space, and we're going to be sharing some experiences today. And if any of you feel the need or would like to share something that you would want to say while remaining anonymous, because obviously we're in a recorded session, you can pop a message in the chat to Helen or myself, and we would be happy to relate back your own experiences or story. So let's start with my journey. A few years ago, and over quite a short period of time, I experienced some quite traumatic events. I went through a divorce after a marriage of 12 years and became a single parent to a 13-year-old boy. I went through a redundancy and then very quickly into a new highly pressured job. And then unfortunately I lost my very beloved father. And all of these things combined caused a massive impact on my mental health. I felt like I was living behind frosted glass. Nothing was really clear in my mind to me anymore, and life became a blur. I retreated away from people. I could be really numb and at the same time cry for such a long period of time that my eyes would swell and I looked like I'd had an allergic reaction. I stopped going out with my friends, and I tried to bury all the feelings that I was trying to deal with at the time. My work took a real nosedive during this time. I really struggled to stay on top of things. I've always been one of those super organised people that knows how to juggle lots of things and multitask, and that became really difficult to maintain. My drive and my motivation dwindled, and my focus became really intermittent. And one of the things that was the worst was the ability to form sentences. I don't know if you know yourselves, when you're a bit nervous or you're a bit unsure of something, sometimes you can't get your words out, and that was just happening to me all the time. And that made it very, very difficult to have good conversations or communications with my colleagues or my manager. So in turn, I lost confidence, because how could I help other people working in employability when I could barely look after myself? I did, however, become quite good at social masking, putting on a face for other people, trying to hide the true version of myself and the range of emotions and pain that I was feeling. I was later told by some really close friends of mine that during that period of time, I could come across to them as a bit over the top or a bit manic. And on top of that, the idea of ever speaking about my mental health or being visibly upset or crying in front of someone really horrified me. As an individual, I am naturally introverted. I quite enjoy alone time actually, and I'm just as happy to stay at home with a good movie and a book by myself than go to a big party. But I can also feel very self-conscious in the company of strangers. My very astute manager at the time knew and could see what was happening and had seen the change in my personality and my work ability. And she suggested that I try the company provided counselling service, which was offered over the phone. Now, I was really unsure to begin with, because all I'd ever known about in terms of counselling or therapy was face-to-face interventions, and that just wasn't something I was prepared to do. It took me 4 weeks to summon up the courage to register for the calls, and when that first call was due, I was nervous, and all my preconceived ideas about therapy and the doctor's couch meant that I didn't think this intervention was going to be right or help me at all. However, what soon became apparent during that first call and following ones was how much I could relax and just concentrate on talking and explaining how I felt. And I did not have to think about my body language. I could sit curled up in my sofa. I didn't need to worry about how I looked or fix my makeup or present myself in a certain way. I could actually take that mask off that I'd been wearing all this time and allow myself to be vulnerable. I felt safe. I was in my own home. I was in my comfort zone, and I felt more in control of the situation. And if I'm honest, knowing I could just put the phone down if I didn't enjoy it anymore and just shut it all off was really appealing, but I never actually did this. The ability to drop in via phone, email, or WhatsApp enhanced that feeling of control. The ability to let things out that I was feeling via text message or an email at that very moment I needed it, even if I wasn't going to have a straight instant response. I began to feel like technology was my friend, which in turn increased my contact with friends and family that I'd isolated myself from, using that same method. And I was able to open up to them more without being present in front of them or being too embarrassed or overloaded with what I was feeling, because I could compose myself and the words I was going to say. I also found other forms of technology to be quite supportive in work. I noticed that I was more responsive to Zoom meetings, knowing I had the option to turn the video off. So kind of why I did this today. It actually helps me concentrate on what I'm doing and feel present in the moment. And I'm sure we've all experienced that dread of looking at our own faces online. Plus, that almost anonymous feeling during online training or webinars gave me the confidence to volunteer questions or responses.
That's really interesting, Emma, because one of the things I love that you've sort of mentioned, one of the things I love about Zoom is that I can unpin myself so I don't have to look at myself. You can't do that. Or if anyone knows how you do that, please do tell me how you do that if you're using the sort of WhatsApp video calls or the Facebook Messenger video calls, those kind of things, FaceTime, because I find myself looking at myself instead of what I should be focusing on and looking at some of my sort of errors as I see them. And like you say, that mask is there and I can feel quite exposed. I'm just wondering if anyone else has any experiences along the lines of these that they would be comfortable sharing, either via chat or even we could unmute mics if people wanted to. Sort of moving, thinking about what you've been saying, Emma. It's a really interesting point, and I know we've discussed this before, and you sort of went on that journey with me, but I found the first lockdown with COVID particularly difficult. The first week in lockdown, and I would say, and I should probably share this with the group first, I'm a worrier quite naturally. I wouldn't say I suffer from anxiety, but I overthink things and, you know, and worry. So when the first lockdown happened, I started to worry, but I would call it sort of healthy, natural worrying. But then the first week of lockdown, the end of the first week of lockdown, my 7-year-old daughter got a temperature and developed a cough. And that spiraled then. And it was really, really difficult to use the techniques to deal with anxiety that we're aware of or that we know. And I knew there were steps that I should take in order to keep it under control, but it was very, very difficult too, because I felt very powerless. And you've mentioned control in a situation where all of the places I would normally turn for help felt closed to me. So I would look online on the NHS service and was told to stay home and just wait. Tried to phone 111, basically was told to stay home and just wait. Phone the doctors, was told to just stay home and wait. And I could feel my anxiety, and at the same time was aware that I needed to be calm for my family. And that was adding to the feeling of pressure. And for me, very much technology helped me in certain ways, but really didn't help me in other ways. So for me, I turned to WhatsApp in this situation, and I sort of used some WhatsApp groups with fellow parents to get their thoughts and advice and their reassurances. And I also talked to colleagues. I know I contacted you quite a lot, Emma, and talked to other people. What I found really difficult to do was things that were face-to-face. So the Zoom meetings, very much as you've said, I didn't want to have my video on because I felt quite exposed and because I was getting upset, and other people seemed to be dealing with the COVID situation better than I did. And so found myself sort of withdrawing. But that WhatsApp, being able to do WhatsApp through the messenger service was really a lifeline. Also had to withdraw completely from social media, because what I found was every time I looked on social media, people were posting things that I really didn't want to see. You know, all the scary statistics. And at the time, you know, we just didn't know what was going to happen. So yeah, for me, being able to use digital support to control what support I got and the access, for me was absolutely massive. And for those of you who were on the session earlier with Dr. Kylie, we ran the start of the IEP Live Learn Lunch series was a series of sessions that Dr. Kylie did around mental health in the COVID situation. And that for me was a real fantastic starting point, because I was producing the session, I was behind the scenes, I didn't really have to say anything, nobody had to see me, but I could sit and listen to what she was saying about how to manage your anxiety in that situation. And it was wonderfully helpful. I didn't need to have my social mask on. I could just sit and listen to an expert talk to me about things I know, but also give me some takeaways that I could go and start to implement. And it was really the start of the journey for me. So, you know, that's my experience with this at the moment. No, thank you. So I know you wanted to do a poll at this point. So yes, I think what we'll do, let's go to the group and find out, you know, we've talked a little bit about some of the different aspects that we've used. It'd be great to hear back from you what tools you've used first. And you can answer as many of these as possible. You should be able to see those on the screen now. So which tools have you used? And it doesn't need to be during the COVID situation, as Emma's already said. You know, this is just the different forms of digital support that are out there at the moment. So we've got some scores, or some answers I should say, they're not scores coming in already. So people are saying they're using video conferencing such as Zoom, Teams and Adobe Connect, some social media. So at the moment, it looks like video conferencing is by far the most often used. Social media is up there. Off-the-shelf e-learning is on there as well. And I'm wondering, and maybe people wouldn't mind popping some things into chat, I'm wondering if some of this stuff has been done during lockdown. I know during lockdown, I did a lot more, took the opportunity to engage with learning and development myself. We've got some in-house as well, also some people using blogs and TED Talks as well. So that's really interesting. I'm going to share those results now. And it is quite interesting because what we've seen after a slower start, WhatsApp actually was the one that you've all used the most as well, closely followed by the video conferencing and e-learning off the shelf. So some really interesting results there. Emma, I'm going to hand back over to you.
Thank you, and thanks for participating. It's really interesting to see how similarly we can all feel and the sorts of tools that we use. Let me just pop on back to here. So we do actually believe that the apps, in particular to support mental health, will become as common as the apps that we use now to kind of physically monitor physical health, like the running trackers, Fitbits, Apple Watches. That flexibility to check in on yourself, measure your own mental health and have access to support on the go will be a huge help to those that struggle with conventional methods of mental health support services.
And I think it's interesting, isn't it, Emma, that we sort of looked in Kylie's session about the fact that the E or the digital mental health support can be as effective as face-to-face, but it needs to be done in a a secure and safe way. And one of the things I didn't naturally turn to during that time was the apps. And I know I've chatted about this with people before. It could be an age thing for me because it's not my first go-to place. But actually, when I first sort of chatted with, sort of looked at what Kylie was going to be delivering, I did engage with an app. I just didn't realize that I'd engaged with an app. And one of the things that I use, I have a Fitbit, and I used the breathing meditation app on that, where for those of you who maybe haven't used it, you breathe in time with it and it senses your breathing and it helps slow your heart rate down and calm you down. But I didn't see that as using an app. I didn't connect that with using an app to support my mental health until it was sort of pointed out to me that that's exactly what it is doing. But I don't know that there's any particular science behind that, and that started us on our journey to explore this side of the new side of mental health support further.
Absolutely. Thanks, Helen. So how can we as practitioners choose wisely in the recommendations of support tools for those of our clients that are struggling with mental health? As Dr. Kylie Henderson stated, online reviews and star ratings can be really deceptive and manipulative. You only have to think about things like TripAdvisor or Amazon reviews to know that they're not always truth-telling. In the UK, 38 million adults access the internet every day. That's 76% of the adult population. On average, internet users aged 16 and over spend 20 hours per week online, and more than 70% have a social media profile. So what path can we take to balance information overload and successful support? Sophie Turnbull from the British Hospital Society writes, for those with depression, the challenge of using digital interventions comes not only from the cognitive load of engaging, but also the need to constantly reflect on their mood, something that can be really challenging when they do not want to think about their depression. Users talk about the importance of focusing on positive things that will help them rather than the negative things that will affect them. Application interventions, or apps, avoid that need for constant self-reflection on mood changes by using mobile and sensing technologies to monitor mood changes, very similar to the heart rate or breathing exercises that Helen mentioned. Users also raised issues about what's called the digital balance, that importance of maintaining relationships with others rather than disappearing into the digital space. Apps require minimal input, which means the user is not required to spend as much time in that digital space. They are promising and particularly beneficial for those with mental health conditions. The use of sensing technologies and the delivery of intervention when it is needed means that the amount of engagement required is lower than traditional interventions. For people with mental health conditions struggling with fatigue or concentration in particular, that reduced cognitive load of app interventions may result in prolonged engagement and therefore a benefit gained from the intervention. As part of our research for this responder session, we needed to understand the best way for a practitioner to begin exploring mental health support, and where would you begin? I think Helen's got something she would like to sort of talk about on this element.
Yeah, definitely. And I see, I've been asking if people have used any apps themselves, and Anne-Louise, thank you for coming back with Headspace, which is an excellent app. And I believe we've covered Headspace in our sort of weekly e-bulletins that we've been sending out to people. Yeah, it's difficult to know who to trust. And I think when we found it was a big responsibility when we were asked to follow Dr. Kylie as a responder session, because we don't, we're L&D consultants and we don't consider ourselves to be experts in this setting. And Emma's been an advisor herself. And it dawned upon us that actually, although we're not experts, we do have mental health issues ourselves at various times, and we have had to support friends, family, and customers in the workplace with their mental health at times. So where do you start to do it in a safe and secure way? Thinking about what Kylie said about that, out of the 20,000 apps on the App Store, only 73 had language that was clinical or said they had any evidence, and only a third of them were deemed to be unsafe. So there's a massive amount of information out there, and there could be vulnerable people accessing it, and our roles are often to support vulnerable people. So we asked ourselves, where do we go? Where do we go to look for safe and secure and trust advice that you can trust? And the answer that came to us was, the answer that came to me, the first place I thought of going was either to the NHS or some of the charities, the specialist charities out there. We decided to focus on the NHS, and we looked into the process and the support that's there. So what we're going to share with you now, and what Emma's going to talk you through, are some of the apps in the app library of the NHS. And we're just going to share with you the process they go through. They work closely with NICE, and they have a process to make sure that any of the apps that appear in their library, you can be rest assured are clinically safe and secure to use.
Thanks, Helen. So the link that's on the screen, please do take a minute to make a note of that if you'd like. Obviously, the session has been recorded, so if you want the opportunity to review it that way, you can. The great thing about this library is you can see quite clearly which apps have been tested already by the NHS and which are still in process, as you can see in the bottom corner with Chill Panda, and also those that are free to use. There are apps on the library that can cost as little as 99 pence or as much as £30 to buy. Some are free with in-app purchases, but each app has a description to help you decide on the appropriate or relevant recommendations to your clients. This is an excellent base for signposting. As Helen said, you don't need to be an expert in mental health while supporting your clients to manage their own. So how does an app make the grade? Because what we want to know is, as we've said before, the difference between those general star ratings and the process they go through. So developers of the apps will need to answer a range of digital assessment questions to make sure that only safe and secure apps and digital tools are published on that NHS library. The questions in the assessment have been designed by experts from technical and policy backgrounds, and they cover national standards, regulations and best practice, and help see how a product performs against important criteria. The number of questions depends on the product's complexity. Does it link with other services, such as some apps, for example, might link with your doctor's notes or your doctor's records or your therapist. It looks at potential clinical effectiveness and also, most importantly, the data protection responsibilities of the user. The questions examine evidence of how the product performs and whether users would see benefits to their health and well-being and the safety and security of their own information. What's the future for this? As Helen said, Dr. Kylie did focus a little bit on the American way of assessing the data, but we really want to be looking at the UK models for this. And NHS England are working with NICE, which is the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, to support the new digitally enabled therapy assessment programme. The plan is to have 14 digital therapy products which will be accessed for use in the NHS improving access to psychological therapies, or the IAPT. You know how they love the acronyms in the NHS. And this is due to be launched in 2020. And this basically will help expand that provision of psychological therapies, as well as improving access to digital services. Both goals set out in have been set out in the 5-year forward view for mental health plan and the NHS long-term plan. And as we've seen so far, both personally and scientifically, the evidence shows that therapies can achieve comparable outcomes to face-to-face therapy. And many people prefer to access the therapy in this way. And also, as Dr. Anderson mentioned, young people in particular are far more likely to avoid face-to-face intervention and prefer the tech-based support approach. So although we focused on apps which are more likely to be used due to ease of access, price, choice or personal control, and to avoid that feeling of being overwhelmed, There are other choices out there rather than just applications, and we found several really, really good and engaging charities online that you can approach direct for guidance and advice. They have contact options, they have a chat, a lot of them have chat screens, so you can just pop your messages in and speak to them direct. And also you can signpost your clients and customers directly to these particular charities, and they can then sign up with these charities to get support further on. So we kind of like to now give you the opportunity to share your experiences of or of signposting clients. How have you found this, and what have the results been? And also, you know, if you think about your role in general, how can you ensure that your own awareness of technology updates and online events? So Helen's going to have a quick look at the chat for me. We'll give you a few moments to have a look, and if you want to let me know how people are responding, Helen, that would be great.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Emma. Yes, so Kelsey's mentioned along the lines where I was talking about the apps and recommending the apps to participants for support, and says that while I've been recommending these apps to participants, I don't have any feedback on the user experience. And I'm wondering if that's the same situation for everyone. Now we are, you know, one of the things that we can do today, I've given you control over your mics. If anyone would like to share and doesn't want to type it out, please do join in. Otherwise I can read these out. Kelsey also says that you have a mental health resource pack that links to the NHS digital apps library, which is great. And one of the things I like about the NHS digital apps library is that you can click on it and you get a description. Each of the apps, you get a description of the apps, what demographic it's for, what sort of age group. There's lots of different apps for different ages. And there's also a description of if they have been updated, and when the apps are updated, they're reassessed and they go under review again, to make sure that any of those changes don't have an impact on the clinical efficiency or efficacy of those apps. But it'd be interesting to have some feedback, wouldn't it? So how can we go about collecting that from our learners or from our participants is a question for us all. Motivation and engagement, says Alan, getting their buy-in to use the apps. And that's an interesting one as well. It'd be interesting to know, do you meet with resistance to using the apps? Are people quite open to it? And have any of you used the apps yourselves?
I think probably one of the ways to look at engagement is to look at the other interests that that particular client or customer may have, and whether or not they utilize an app for that. For example, if they're following a particular diet, or they have someone that they follow on Instagram, and being able to bring in line to that interest the idea that they could tap into something that no one else needs to be aware of, that they can have complete personal control over, and it's just at their fingertips. And it's no different than being able to use other applications which they are generally interested in, to focus on themselves a little bit more, would probably be the angle I might take on that.
Okay, thank you, Emma. I know for myself, I don't think it was on the slides that we shared, but one of the NHS apps that was has been assessed and recommended on there is called Worry Tree. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm a natural worrier, and I think that's definitely going to be one of those I use myself, because I think, you know, for me to recommend it, I think for me it would be useful to use it, but I actually think I get a lot from using the Worry Tree app, because I'm definitely, my family described me as a worrier and have ever since I was a little girl, so it's obviously a trait with me. Got a thumbs up from Alan, so that's good to see there. So any other thoughts from anyone? We've not got any other questions in the chat at the moment. Has anyone else tried any of the apps themselves, or got any feedback that they've received from customers or participants, I should say? Emma, have you used any of the apps?
I use the apps for different things. I mean, I've used a meditation one. I think, as you guys may or may not be aware, coming up and doing events like this and presenting can be quite a challenge, nervous, and I need to regulate myself a little bit like that. So there was a meditation app I used this morning, which just helps me to calm down a little bit and getting that breathing in the nose and out the mouth, and it really works. So I quite like that one. And I use the health app that's on my iPhone, because I'm quite keen on trying to be more active, so I can see the days that I'm kind of more on the couch and the ones that when I'm not. And it's good to track that myself and be able to feel positive about it when I feel like I'm making some progress. But it is a new thing, and you know, technology is out there and it's being used, and just kind of being more aware of what's out there and how we can look into that. So we're getting any more feedback, Helen?
Not at the moment, not at the moment. I think for me, the journey for me has been, I was quite an early adapter for digital learning, as in blended learning and delivering training face to face. It's something that, you know, I enjoyed. I didn't think I would, because I love classroom delivery. And this process has made me realise that although I was an early adopter for blended learning and really embracing digital learning, I've not been quite so much with the sort of health and well-being aspect of it. And I think my key takeaway from this experience and working as a responder and attending Kylie's session was, I think it's wonderful that we know that the technology can be as effective. I think all of the research showing that is absolutely wonderful, because it gives us those options. I think the fact that the research is showing and can lead us to understand that young people are more likely to use an app than they are to speak to someone until they're at crisis point, helps us to think about how we support people, our friends, whether they're participants, friends, family. It gives us more tools in our toolbox, but we do need, it comes with that responsibility, doesn't it? And I know, having worked in the employability sector, we all feel it, that making sure that when we're working with vulnerable people, we're giving them the very best advice possible. So my takeaway has been about we can look for places where it's safe, and we can give good advice, because there are people out there making sure that we can. And we can also think about how we share some of these facts with people around, just because it's got 5-star ratings on the Apple Store, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily a clinically, you know, sound app. Kelsey's asked, has anyone used Together All, formerly Big White Wall? It's linked in the library, but it does have a cost for our organisation. I've demoed it with their team and it looks good, but I want to make sure it's the right investment when there are a number of free apps out there. This is one that I picked up on, Kelsey, when I looked at that app. I believe it's different areas, isn't it? If you're in different areas, in some areas it can be accessed free, but in other areas there's a cost. So I'm waiting to see if anyone else on the session today says they've used it. But what we could possibly look to do is look into this more and follow up after this session, and maybe reach out to the IEP community to get some of that feedback for you, because I think it's key, isn't it? Before we invest the limited resources we have, it would be good to know that we're going to get a good return on them.
I was just going to say that there's a great way to do that is to ask your peers. So if you have a network, whether it's an organizational network or a large one such as LinkedIn, where you can meet with lots of other people from the same sector as you, and just ask the question, you'll be surprised how many people will be happy to share what they think about a product and whether they've used it or not, which is really useful.
That's a fantastic idea. LinkedIn, I find, is especially throughout the sort of COVID period, I found that people on LinkedIn have really been on there to try and share knowledge and share information and really support. So I'm sure that that's something that we could look at doing too. But Kelsey, please do pick up with me via the IEP after this session, and we'll look at maybe how we could get some of that information for you.
Okay, thanks, Helen. Okay,
excellent.
So.
I think that's probably all we have time for now, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. And I think that the last key thing I wanted to say is that when you're looking at signposting or support, it's better to look at the ones that have been developed by the doctors and therapists, because they don't have a vested interest in the financial outcome of an app, but they want the outcome for the participant, something that's measurable in their progress. So I hope that you found today's session useful, everybody. I really want to take the time to thank you very much for taking part. And is there anything else you want to finish with regarding the conference, Helen?
Yes, I do. You took the words right out of my mouth, Emma. So obviously this isn't the last session, well, not obviously, but this isn't the last session of the conference. We do have some sessions running this afternoon, and we do hope to see some of you there. First of all, we will have Andy Derman from EMSI, who will be joining us to look at the labour market, in particular labour market information, and how advisors can use that to develop the skills that they need to be as effective as possible. So it's going to be a really fascinating one, that is. And then we will have two responders. We have Skills Forward, who will be joining us to look at, well, you can know your labour market information, but actually you also need to understand your customer and how that can be done most effectively to understand their needs. And we will also have CogniSoft, who will be looking at people, process and technology, and they will be taking us through how those steps can help us to be as effective as possible when we're working with our participants. So thank you once again for joining us for this session. It's been, we hope you found it useful, and we look forward to seeing you again at future live Learn Lunch sessions, because we're always there supporting them. So please do keep coming and joining us for these sessions. Thank you, everybody.
Take care, everyone.